So can we talk a little bit about just barriers for community hospitals and, and why it's so critical to include these patients?
So if we start talking about advancing clinical trials or creating new ways and methods to run them, we're going to have to think about the barriers of adoption at that level, at the community practice level. That, do they have the staff? Do they have the regulatory oversight? How do we do that? And how do we make it easier for the physicians to participate? In the academic setting, on the flip side, they've got the teams. They have clinical trial teams that oversee these trials, and that's why the majority of clinical trials are run in academia. So, if the majority of the patients are in the community, we have to really focus on how we help community practices adopt a trial.
Yeah. So it's really a question of privilege. So those who are not so privileged are potentially also the ones who need these therapies the most.
Correct.
And so, so, what's the future for them then? What does that look like in terms of being able to bridge this gap?
We have to create new ways, new modalities to bring trials to patients. And we're not there yet. Typically, patients who have the ability to head to an academic center, let's say from, in my area, from San Diego, and they're trying to go find a clinical trial that maybe it's not being offered in San Diego at UCSD Morris Cancer Center. They're going to maybe go up to UCLA because there's something available for their disease. And that isn't something that people can do. Not everybody can travel and leave their jobs and, have the support of their family because they're not well, and so how are they going to get to that clinical trial and have the means to do that? And I would say the majority of people don't have the means to travel to a clinical trial. And we're trying to find those new ways. We're trying to, say, what is it going to take to bring a trial to a patient's home, and where there can be oversight, and we can have them participating in a trial, have access to novel therapeutics, that would benefit them when there's nothing clinically available for them. Virtual clinical trial is, purely virtual, right? We prescribe, we enroll a patient virtually, we oversee them virtually. A just-in-time trial, I think, still has some oversight. They go to the clinic. They, we say, hey, they qualify for this particular trial. There's probably still some visits at that physician, local physician's office, but that it's overseen by a broader protocol, maybe at a university, community practices involved. They find the patient, and there's still some back and forth with that patient, but it's at the community level. And then I see a nice evolution from that into the virtual clinical trial.
Okay, so just in time would be sort of the next, I guess, movement in this space. And virtual might be, a decade out. Is that fair to say?
I hope not, especially in this landscape. When with COVID, I think we're seeing that there's, new innovation, in a time of a trying time. I think there's always new innovations, and we're going to do obviously things remotely, and we're finding a way to do that. So I actually think that we're probably going to approach virtual clinical trials much quicker. But again, it's really about the regulatory and the regulatory oversight.
Right, we need all stakeholders conversing and having these types of conversations, which is kind of why we're having this conversation, so we can also invite others into this. I'm just curious, what will it take to sort of educate the masses, and who are the most, besides the regulators, who are the most important stakeholders to kind of convince or to educate?
I mean, really, I think it starts with patients. Patients who, especially in our situation, we're talking about advanced stage disease. And there's so many moving parts for them and confusion. And so how do we make education, how do we educate them on, the importance of clinical trials, that they're not afraid of them. A lot of patients think, and my dad is a great example, they think they're going to get a placebo and not the medication. And so how do we educate them on clinical trials themselves first? Second is, how do we educate them on their own data and the importance of their data, and that it's important for their care and their understanding, and then what's happening with their data. I think it's a huge educational effort for patients. And you can go on from there. Then it's the physician, then it's the regulatory, patient advocacy groups. I lump them with patients. But you can go on and on from, but it really starts first with the patient and the physician, always.
I don't even think people fully understand what the importance is of data ownership, because people don't think that, for such a long time, humans we don't have ownership of our data. And so why is personal health data ownership so important, and especially as we move into the age of digital health?
Patients have no idea the kind of data that's being generated behind the scenes from their testing alone. How would you even know to ask for it? How would you even know how to track it and take ownership of that if you don't even know it's being generated? So to me, that's the first issue, right? So patient education on that. Then second is the awareness, and then how do I take ownership of it? What does that even look like? What does that mean? Can I put it into a health vault? Can I get those raw data files? There's, this principle, and we had talked about this before, this idea of self-economy. And how do I take ownership of my own data so that when somebody wants to license or use it, I can then provision it on my terms? And I think that that's something, when we talk about a decade, I think it's going to take a decade for educating patients and people on how to take control of their own data, because we first have to understand where it's being generated from.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And I think, with everything that's happening in the news, with Cambridge Analytica, with, just a lot of Equifax, just like a lot of these, just really public events, I hope that, those who are watching the news are starting to feel the urgency a little bit. But can we, back up a little and just talk about, I guess, the dark side of this? Because, you're talking about some, really vulnerable patients, and also genomic data. And so what happen if this data gets into the wrong hands? And like, who are these potential bad actors?
I know that companies sell data, genomic data and healthcare data, and it's quote unquote de-identified. Okay, fine. We remove some of those, identifiers if it's, social security, certain, names, whatever, birth date. But the reality is we're talking about, and this is where the gray line comes in, is we're talking about DNA. A person is identifiable. And so how do we protect patients and people from their DNA and their, the Henrietta Lacks story of her cell lines being sold without knowledge? And, I believe that she's one of many. She's not, a single story. One of the things that I'll say is that I've talked to many of people just about the California Consumer Data Privacy Act, and people don't even know what that is. And even people in the medical field, they don't even know that about this particular Data Privacy Act. I think they're becoming more aware, but I'm like, how are you selling data without telling patients you're selling their data? They are consumers, right? And the company should be telling patients or giving them the opportunity to opt out of the selling of their data. And that is definitely not happening today.
Yeah, exactly. It can't just be in the T's and C's, as they call it, the terms and conditions. It has to be very clear, because let's be real, like we're not reading through the terms and conditions. We should be. Maybe we need to be educated on actually how to read through the terms and conditions. And I think this is also just tied to, the way that our society moves. We're just hungry for information. We're moving really fast. We're not taking a moment to breathe and actually think through, what are we signing up for when we download, X, Y, and Z app. think people often talk about the value of digital, but they often forget about, who are the people behind the digital? Who are the people who are making the
Right.
decisions? Are they inclusive?
Yeah.
Are they compassionate? Are they ethical?
Yeah, there's a great article by the CEO of Novartis, Voz, and he made a really good point. He said, he's very much an innovator and loves technology. And basically, what he said in this article was that these tools are great. AI, NLP, it's all very, very important. However, how do we just get good quality data at the point of care? These tools are not tools that physicians are going to use at the point of care. They don't have the understanding how to use them. They don't have the time to use them. And we have to catch that important data at the point of care. And that's what we have focused on, is how do we get the physicians to participate at the point of care and provide the important data so that we can understand clinical evidence of whether it's a device or a drug.
Yeah. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom, and for just taking such a thoughtful approach to the future of healthcare and clinical trials, and also, for really focusing on a really important and vulnerable patient population. So yeah, I'm wishing you so much success.